Yes, indeed, folks, listen to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com with myself, Total Biscuit. Once again, we managed to successfully break the listener record, and it is actually now starting to cause the server to get hammered a little bit. So it looks like I'll have to come up with an alternative solution for that for next week. I'll probably move us onto the more powerful box for the primary stream and just mirror on CynicalBrit.com as opposed to what we're doing right now. Oh, yeah, we're going to need a bigger boat. Jeez. Well, we'll see what we can do about that. Shouldn't be a problem, I don't think. Now, something new came up on an MMO champion very, very recently. Question is what, you might ask? Well, if you have a browser open, you can go and have a look at it yourself. MMO Champion, MMO-champion.com, the place to get basically every piece of information you could ever imagine when it comes to WoW. So, what exactly are we talking about right here? Well, it's called the Flexible Raid Lock System. Yeah. Now, what is this all about, you might ask? Let's find out, shall we? Gonna have a bit of a read. Quote from Bashiok. Almost 6 months ago, we announced that Cataclysm raids were being redesigned to make both raid sizes the same difficulty, drop the same quality of loot, and exist on the same lookout. The evolution in raid philosophy is based on the belief that the size of your raiding group should be a choice based solely on what's more fun and enjoyable for you. And in my opinion, that is absolutely the correct way to look at it. For half of Wrath, I raided in a 25-man guild. And then for half of Wrath, I raided in a 10-man guild. And you want to know why I did that? Because that's what I wanted to do at the time. I enjoyed, at one point, raiding with a smaller group of people, where the focus was more on the individual. But of course, because of the difficulty level, it wasn't quite as difficult as I would have liked. And then, at times, I had more fun with the more epic experience of a 25-man, whereby there's a lot more going on, it's a lot more complex, and there's a lot more for you to worry about. It is, like I said, a very epic fight. It's much more epic than a 10-man. So, it was about half and half, really. Like, when did I quit? I quit after I did 2 months? Actually, maybe less than that. About a month's worth of Nax got me to quit the game until Ulduar came out. Then I did Ulduar, we went up to Yogg, we did Yogg, and we did some hard modes, and then I stopped. And I quit all the way through all of Tier 9, because I was told Tier 9 was garbage, and as it turns out it was. And I started again when Icecrown Citadel came out, and then I did a bit at Tier 9 and some Tier 10 there as well. So, for half of that, the Ulduar and the Naxxramas stuff, I was in a 25-man guild. And for the other half, I was in a 10-man guild for ICC and TOC. Like I said, that was entirely out of personal preference. I could have very easily got into either size guild if I so desired. It's not hard to get into a guild. You just apply with a good application and you usually get in. I suppose some people have this mistaken idea, including our esteemed columnist earlier, that to get into a guild requires some kind of blood sacrifice. It's not like the bloody Masons. All you need to do is prove that you're not an idiot. It's really not that hard. I suppose some people also have the idea that the only guilds around are like Insidia, For the Horde, and Paragon, and there are no other guilds, and that's why it's so hard to get into a guild. It's a self-created problem that idiots tend to create for themselves. Like, oh, why can't I get into a guild? I don't know, maybe because you're a whining, stinking crybaby, and nobody wants to raid with somebody like that. Anyway, so, Bashiok goes on to say, you should not have to complete the same raiding content twice in a week to maximize your character's progression. Correct! Because that is terrible. Those systems are a culmination of a great deal of design and player feedback from the last few years. With the release of the 4.0.1 patch, the new flexible raid lock system will debut in Icecrown Citadel and the Ruby Sanctum. With the flexible raid lock system, instead of being locked to a specific raid size or raid group, each character will have the opportunity to defeat each raid encounter once a week. You can kill Lord Marigar or Lady Deathwhisper with a 10-man raid on Wednesday, join a 25-man raid to kill Festigut and Rotface on Thursday, and then lead a completely new 10-man raid to kill the Lich King on Friday. Every raid has a list of encounters associated with the zone. For example, ICC has 12 encounters. After you defeat Lord Marigar, you can open up your character's raid information dialog and you'll see a list of encounters in ICC with Marigar marked as defeated. You may no longer fight the Lord Marigar with any raid size or difficulty until the weekly raid reset for your region occurs. Interesting. So, this is actually a 180 on what they said they would do. And that actually presents a number of problems. So, when they first announced the 25 and 10, let's just say, Equality Act, Yeah, it really is. It's like some kind of Senate bill to ensure that everyone is equal in that regard. Yeah. It is odd, isn't it? When this Equality Act was actually put into the game, they said you could go down from 25 to 10, but that's it. You can only do it once. Once you do that, you can't go back up to 25. I don't like the current implementation, and this is the reason why. So, the separation previously added some legitimacy to 10-man raiding. And by legitimacy, I mean that 10-man guilds could actually compete for world firsts. Yeah, legitimately. And they could be respected in that regard. Name one famous 10-man guild. No, can't think of one. I can't think of a single famous 10-man guild at all. And I tend to keep on top of the raiding scene. Why? Because there are none. Why would there be? Right now, the raid content for a 10-man is easier. They get lesser loot, so you're going to be paying all your attention to 25s. Now, because 10-man is actually a playstyle choice as opposed to a difficulty level choice, so says Blizzard, they've declared this, so it must be true, then you would think that 10-man guilds would start to come to prominence and would be able to compete in their own kind of division, as it were. However, the problem that we have right now is that that might not be the case, and the reason that might not be the case is because if you can change between 10 and 25-man at will, then you run into problems. That means 25-man guilds now have a marked advantage over 10-man. So 10 and 25-man encounters are for the most part supposed to be very similar in difficulty. The instance in general is what it's balanced on. It's not balanced on a fight-by-fight basis. Obviously, depending on certain mechanics, some things are going to be harder than others. So say if there's a mechanic that blows up one specific raid member, that's actually going to be harder on 10-man than it is on 25. Why? Because losing 10% of your raid is far, far more lethal than losing like 3.5% or so. Obviously. Makes perfect sense, right? So, you've got a bit of a problem there. It is, it's problematic. Why would it be? Why wouldn't it be? I mean, it's obviously problematic. However, there are other things which are more difficult. Say there is an AoE effect, or a chain lightning effect, or something like that. When you have more members in your raid, and you're in a similar space, it is actually more difficult to avoid that. So, it's going to be balanced on an instance-by-instance basis across the board. And there will be variance in terms of difficulty. Obviously, there will be. Now, the thing is that is acceptable. And before this, you weren't allowed to switch between the two. If you could go from 25 to 10, but you couldn't go back. So you couldn't go backwards and forwards and muck about and stuff like that. It would lock you in there for the rest of the week. Here, that's no longer the case. So, what I can see happening is flicking between 25 and 10, 25 and 10, blah, blah, blah. And you might say, well, Total Biscuit, that doesn't actually matter, does it? Why wouldn't it? Well, the simple answer is this. Why does it matter? The reason it matters, ladies and gentlemen, is that you get more gear per raider. Yes, more gear per raider on 25-man mode than you do on 10. So, here's how you break it. I'm in a 25-man guild. I do everything up to the last boss of an instance in 25-man mode. I deliberately stack items on my A team, as it were, my 10-man team. So, I feed them, yeah? I power them up. I give them more items than they would otherwise have gotten. And indeed, you don't even have to do that. Because of the way they're doing it, they're saying you get more items per raider, so you don't even have to deliberately feed items to a group of 10, because they'll get more anyway on average. And then they switch to 10-man for the final boss. They beat it because they are overgeared in comparison to a 10-man guild, so they beat it first, and then 10-man guilds, again, have no legitimacy whatsoever, because they can't compete. It's as simple as that. It sounds like an incredibly dumb system. I don't know why. I have no idea why they would actually implement that. It seems so unbelievably stupid. Okay. So, it goes on to say, another key change is that if you join someone else's raid in progress, you are no longer locked to that raid after merely zoning in. Well, that's all good, honestly. It would be good to not have that happen, so there's no problem there. Basically, when you beat a boss, blah, 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 it'll tell you, etc., etc. So, let's look at another example of the flexible raid lock system. A guild schedules 3 nights for ICC 25 on Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. On Wednesday, the raid defeats Lord Marigar, Death Whisper, the Gunship, and Sailfang. On Thursday, 5 people cancel their raid attendance due to real-life emergencies. The raid leader knows that if he cancels Thursday raiding, there's little chance he'll have enough time on Saturday to defeat the other 8 bosses. So he splits the remaining 20 into 2 10-player groups. Each new raid enters Ice Crown Citadel, defeats Rotface, Festigut, Blood Council, and Valithera Streamwalker. And next Saturday, with all 25 players online, they reform the 25 and enter again, and then they kill the rest. Okay. Well, that's good, but I can just see the disadvantages of it, honestly. You're moving between that and also... yeah, I assume that... I'm trying to think here how exactly this would end up working. I assume that, say, you split it into 2 10-man groups, and one 10-man group got to Syndragoza, and the other 10-man group only got to Putricide. If you reform the 25-man group based on the 10-man group, I assume that they then skip those entirely, right? That must be the way it works. Okay. Let's look at the rest of it, shall we? This is more of an information segment for anyone else, because this is a wall of frickin' text. While players can freely move between raids of different sizes in normal difficulty, there are some additional rules for heroic. If 10 or 25 player raids defeat a boss in heroic difficulty, then those players may now only raid additional heroic encounters with that specific raid. If your heroic 25-man raid defeats the first 4 bosses in ICC on heroic, then they may not split up into 2 10-player raids and continue to fight in heroic difficulty. Ah. Interesting. Okay, now we're in business. Let's read that again just to make absolutely sure, because this is kind of complicated. If a 10 or 25 player raid defeats a boss in heroic difficulty, those players may now only raid additional heroic encounters with that specific raid. If your heroic 25 player raid defeats the first 4 bosses of ICC on heroic, they may not split into 2 10-player raids and continue to fight in heroic difficulty. Right, so this indicates to me a very clear statement. That clear statement is that normal modes don't matter. Heroic mode is all that matters in terms of progress. And actually, yeah, to some degree they're right. But that also fills me with a little bit of fear. The problem with that is that they may nerf normal mode down to absurdly low levels like we've seen before. And again, the problem with that is that you will never make the jump. I've said this time and time and time again. Think of how school works. Think of how education works in general. How do you learn? You learn by going from, let's say, the English school system. When I was around anyway, they probably changed this. They had something called key stages. Key stage 1, key stage 2, key stage 3, and key stage 4. They represented your overall education. I think there might have been 5 as well, I can't really remember. And you had to progress from one to the next, and you didn't skip. Yeah? We don't really do skipping in UK schools. Maybe some of the private schools do, but in our normal mainstream education, we don't skip grades like the US does. But let's say, even if we were making an example, an analogy, if you will, to the US education system, which is allowing you to skip grades, what happens if you skip from grade 6 to grade 10? I would imagine that you're going to have a massive number of issues there. Because education is a gradual thing, the learning process is a gradual thing, it's got to be a smooth curve. It's going to go all the way up and up and up, and it might get harder and harder and harder, but the point is that at that point you've increased your capacity to learn, so you can learn faster. Which is why you can have a curve that starts to get steeper and steeper. What you can't have is a curve that starts off gently and then, woo, straight up there. I'm not talking about a brick wall, but I'm talking about a very sheer cliff face right here. We're talking Eve level of learning curve right here. That doesn't work. You cannot learn that way. You can't. You just can't do it. I'd like to give an example. This actually happened to us in our guild. Let me give you an example of this. This was sort of around the end of TOC. We put together a 10-man just before ICC came out, and we blitzed TOC normal, and then we hit a brick wall with TOC heroic. And honestly, we weren't playing that well. We'd been retired for like almost a year, so You know, most of these guys had just come back to raiding. Some of them hadn't even ever played in Wrath before. We put it together and we did that, and what ended up happening is we just hit this wall, and there is such a massive, massive difficulty disparity between TOC normal and TOC heroic, and ICC has some similar issues in places. That's really problematic, isn't it? That's a real problem. And this massive gap that I've spoken of on the show over and over again could be a real issue in Cataclysm as well. Because here's the problem. People that do bad content don't get any good. They can't do the heroic mode stuff, so they complain and they whine and they scream, and they want content for them. And actually, they're justified in wanting content for them. Because normal mode is too easy for most people. It is absolutely too easy. And hard mode is too hard for a lot of people, which is why you never have a game with an easy and a hard mode only. It's a bad design. Simple as that. You have multiple difficulty levels. And that's how you learn. This has been done before. TBC did it. Once they got some of the stuff into... Vanilla, it did it. Vanilla kind of sucked in terms of learning until they started putting in stuff like Zul'Gurub and AQ20, but by the time they had actually got to the Anchorage patch, things were looking pretty good for learning. You could learn and gear in 20-mans, and 20-mans would teach you a lot of different fundamentals about raiding, and they wouldn't go easy on you either. You could very easily get owned in there. Whereas MC, say for instance, was a terrible raid to learn in, and Blackwing Lair was actually a brick wall for a lot of people. There was a huge difficulty disparity there, and that was before they even brought heroic modes in. And like I said, my concern about that statement is, look, I don't object to the system per se. I think the fact that they are saying, right, you can't do this in heroic mode, that's good. That is good. That stops that nonsense from happening. And it does legitimize 10-mans again in heroic mode. But what that indicates to me is that raid philosophy now is normal modes don't matter. And technically they don't. But the problem is, if they are really, really easy, then we're going to have the same problem we had in Wrath. Exactly the same problem. People are going to be demanding more and more gear so they can actually try hard modes. They want to be over-geared for it. Hard modes end up getting nerfed. The other encounters end up getting nerfed. They get made too easy. And like I said before, if you're working through easy content, you don't learn anything, and the raiding base just sours. And people do sour against the raiding base on that basis. They start fighting amongst themselves. We need only see the attitude of the Wrath guy from the first email I read out on this show to see what easy raiding does to people. It turns them into bigots. Unquestionably. It's so very sad. So yeah, conclusion on this one, folks. I see the practicalities of it. I'm just really worried about that statement. Honestly, I really am. Maybe I'm just looking too much into it. And of course, the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating. But I do find myself very concerned by that, and I hope that Blizzard do not make normal modes too easy and use them as a learning experience for hard modes, as they are supposed to be. My name is Total Biscuit, and you're listening to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com. You guys seem to really like Disharmonia Mundi, so why don't I play some more of it for you? This goes by the name of Building an Empire of Dust. Enjoy.